Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 1, The Engagement. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I already welcome you to the podcast, but welcome to Season 7, a second welcome. I think it's warranted. This is a fantastic season. I think I've said it about 14 times before, but we're just going to keep getting better and better episodes as we move along here. So I am really, really excited to dive into Season 7. For those of you who don't follow Hot and Heavy on the pod, which shame on you, you may not be aware that I made a best of compilation for Season 6. Again, just very sort of low budge. That's the cool way of saying low budget. A video of yours truly acting out some of my favorite Elaine moments from each episode. I had a blast doing it. I've gotten some really fun feedback and quite a few views on the TikTok, if I do say so myself. So those are always so fun to put out there. Maybe one day JLD will see them and she'll want to be my best friend and my dream will be realized. And then she'll be like, Shivani, we need to do like a buddy sitcom together. Maybe we're buddy cops. Maybe we own a Cinco de Mayo together. Maybe we can do something, she can be Elaine again and she buys Cinco de Mayo from Gladys Mayo. I mean, there's so many possibilities. And really, if I'm honest, that is the point to those videos. It's that JLD one day will see them and we'll become best friends. There, I said it. No shame. Another fun thing that came up in the last couple of weeks, apparently there was an Elaine dance competition at a baseball game. I believe it's in Brooklyn. I know that there's a certain venue or arena, stadium, whatever, what have you, sports place that does a Seinfeld day every year or maybe multiple times a year. I can't remember. But I remember the guys from Signcast. That's right. They talked about it and they would go because they both lived in, I think, New Jersey. So they weren't too far. And a lot of times, some of the people who had been on Seinfeld would go and make appearances. None of the, the main characters, but you'd get your Mickeys, your Petermans, your Banyas. But anyway, it seemed like that occurred and there was an Elaine dance competition. And I think every day for over a week, I had a couple of people send me the video of that was going around, which was such a delight. I love that people think about me when they see anything related to Elaine. It makes me happy. It's the same with Depeche Mode. For people who know me really well and understand my obsession with Depeche Mode, they do the same thing. In fact, a friend of mine just sent me, I believe it was Snow Patrol and Death Cab for Cutie at their recent concert, just did a cover of Enjoy the Silence, and it was brilliant. So anyway, that Elaine dance competition was fantastic, and I could have represented. I last time I did it was at the wedding I went to in Cabo. I always do it at a wedding. So if you want to invite me to your wedding, I will do the Elaine dance. Just putting that out there. I've also been really enjoying my tennis. I love tennis and the Grand Slam events. I am like glued to the TV. And the U.S. Open is going on right now. It'll be over this weekend. But man, there's been some amazing tennis. That is of all of the Grand Slam events. So there's the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open. The U.S. Open is the most possible for me to go to. I would love to go to all of them, bucket list items for sure. But I'm hoping by next year I can make that happen. My husband actually just started a new job. We're very excited. A really, really good job for my husband, who's been very patient. Things have been a little bit up and down with, career-wise with him in the last year, but he just started a new position and the CEO has hookups to the U.S. Open. And I was like, oh my God, please just like really do a good job, like do a good job in general, obviously, which he will. But, if we can get in on that US Open ticket stuff, I don't even know what I would do. I feel like my face would hurt if I ever went to anything at the US Open because I'd be smiling like the Joker the whole time. Like Jack Nicholson's Joker, like that kind of severe smile. And it would be worth it because if I get to see a professional live tennis match at a Grand Slam event, done. I would be done. In other exciting news, my husband got a great job, but I just got signed to a really great agency in Utah. I'm really excited. You might be thinking, Utah? What's the big deal? But apparently, Utah is like the hotbed for casting for different television series, movies. It's kind of bizarre, but that's the situation. So I feel really fortunate. A good friend of mine, an actor friend of mine, recommended me. She's already signed to them. She went the extra mile, and the owner of the agency locked my stuff. So yeah, I was really excited to get signed. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you guys will see me in some kind of a Hallmark movie, maybe in Yellowstone, Lifetime movie. That's a lot of what they cast out there. Probably not the Mormon stuff, though. I mean, I know that's big too. In fact, in the paperwork for the agency that I had to fill out, I had to check a box about whether I would be willing to do religious LDS type movies and TV shows. And I did not check that box. No offense to that religion. That's not my jam. So I don't think I would be the right fit for that. But it's Utah, so it makes sense. Okay, enough of my yammering. It's time to get into season 7, The Engagement. The synopsis for this episode is as follows. Jerry and George make a pact to be more mature. George gets engaged to his ex-girlfriend Susan, but Jerry breaks up with his girlfriend for a trivial reason. Elaine recruits Kramer and Newman to get rid of a neighbor's barking dog. This episode was written by Larry David. Now, the first scene is technically the cold open. We no longer have the stand-up from Jerry to open every episode, so now we get these cold opens, which I think was the right move on the show's part. So the cold open is in George's apartment. George is playing chess with his girlfriend. He's super cocky, thinks she has nowhere to go. And he adds to his obnoxiousness with a bunch of sexist statements about how the queen isn't a feminist, likes to take care of her man. And the girlfriend makes a move, and wouldn't you know it, checkmate. George's reaction is to break up with her immediately after that. The actress in this scene is Renee Fea. She has also appeared in ER, Everybody Loves Raymond. She actually played Cher in the TV movie Sonny and Cher's Story. She's also a very prominent voice actor in many video games. I like her. I know she only has one line, and it's very well delivered. So good job with your one line. I also love that she's not at all reacting to George's totally asinine comments. She's just very focused and then checkmates his ass. Is it checkmates or checksmate? I don't know. Anyway, but she takes him down, and it's very fun. All right, next we are in Elaine's bedroom. We can hear a dog barking, and we see Elaine just tossing and turning in her bed, holding a pillow over her head to drown out the barking sound. Finally, she can't take it. She gets up, opens the window, starts screaming, "Shut up! Shut up, you stupid mutt!" My take on this scene, great physical comedy here for JLD. I love that this is like her premiere moment for season 7. She kind of comes out with a bang or a scream, if you will. And man, that commitment JLD shows here. I mean, that's some serious screaming. And we see the consequences of that very soon. This is a storyline I wish I couldn't relate to so well, but I can 1000% relate to. Unfortunately, and I have to say it's been better, well, because I finally spoke up. But we have some neighbors with very small, yippy dogs who just bark constantly. And it was bad for a while, especially during the pandemic. They would be out in the backyard And it was this, let me do an impression of the dogs. There were two of them, and they would rile each other up, clearly. And this was it. Like in this weird ass rhythm. And it just was constant. And my husband and I would just look at each other, like shake our heads. And admittedly, we're not confrontational people. And they're nice neighbors. They're nice people. But that was the one part we're like, are you guys deaf? Like, how are you not hearing this? Well, fast forward of us putting up with this, I kid you not, for like a year and a half. One morning, it was 4 a.m. and I get woken up by the I was like, okay, I'm done. I am done. I cannot do this. So after a few hours, very early still in the morning, probably 7:30 or 8 in the morning, I text my neighbor and I tell her, these dogs bark excessively. And this morning I was woken up at 4 a.m. and was kept up for at least an hour. And I just happened to fall asleep. Not because they stopped barking. They were still out there going strong. How they don't lose their voices or whatever, I don't even understand. Well, then I get a text back. Thankfully, I was kind of nervous. I was like, oh God, I did it. I actually did the confrontation via text. I know that's not, maybe it doesn't count, but still, I brought it to their attention. And she says, oh, I'm so sorry. I know we do need to get it under control. Like, okay, so you're aware of the problem and yet you do nothing about it for years. Well, turned out her husband, who is a pilot, had to leave very early to fly a plane. And she herself and the kids were out of the state. They were in Florida. So her husband just let the dogs out to bark forever. And he wasn't going to be back for hours. I just was like, what? Anyway, this is a very long story. I apologize. But I just can so relate to it. Like there's something about, and these were, again, small yippy dogs. So there's something, no barking's great, but these two little dogs. And another thing that was alarming to me, we have coyotes. We have rattlesnakes in this area. We have hawks. Like those two little, it amazes me that those dogs haven't gotten like attacked or eaten or whatever. Like, I just can't believe there hasn't been an incident with some kind of predatory animal, but whatever, maybe that's why they bark so much. And ultimately too, I'm like, these poor dogs, like, I think they're annoying, but they're barking for a reason. I think they're in distress. I don't know. I'm not a dog expert. Well, anyway, thank you for letting me vent about that. It has been a lot better, I will say. I'm only seeing one dog recently, so I don't know whatever happened to the other dog, maybe predatory animal. I would not wish that on the dogs, but they did end up putting shock collars on the dogs after our complaint. And that helped a lot. And she would let us know too. She'd be like, hey, we're not going to be around for the next couple hours. I am putting the dogs out. Just text me if they get out of control because our son can blah, 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 whatever. But so they were very considerate and they handled it well and they took the feedback. So we very much appreciated that. Didn't tell me to fuck off or anything, which is, that's always your worst fear, right? Like you build up the courage to say something to someone and they tell you to fuck off. Like you don't want that. But no, they were very responsive. So we were very appreciative of them taking care of the problem. All right, next we are at Monk's and Jerry and George are at a booth. Jerry thinks George is pretty sick for breaking up with his girlfriend after she beat you at chess. George says, I don't know how I could perform sexually after that. I was completely emasculated. Anyway, that wasn't the only reason. He says that she loved to say happy pappy. Jerry doesn't really understand, but finally he's like, oh, you're Pappy. Yes, I'm Pappy. I don't know. Tell her not to say it. George is much more comfortable talking about people behind their backs. Anyway, you're not one to talk, George says. You just broke up with Melanie because she shushed you while you were watching TV. And Jerry says, I got a real thing about shushing. And George starts complaining about how he doesn't feel like he got a haircut. His neck is all itchy. And Jerry's listening to this and he just exhales with frustration. George is like, what? Jerry's like, what are we doing? What in God's name are we doing? and basically expresses his disappointment in his life and how they aren't men, and George agrees, no, we're not men, and that he just wants to be normal. Jerry points out all their faults, especially with women. George admits that, he thinks about Susan a lot, the woman who worked for NBC. George saw her the previous week and said that she looked great. And, oh, by the way, her lesbianism didn't take. Yes, Jerry, you thought she was good looking, right? What does that matter? Well, I was just curious. And Jerry's really determined. He's going to make some changes. I'm going to call Melanie again. So what if she shushed me? So Jerry's all in on this, and George agrees, and they shake hands. Ooh, the fated handshake. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry's on the phone with Melanie, straightening everything out. You happy, Pappy? I love that they call that back so quickly and that she's clearly like, what? Oh, it's just an expression. And then Jerry says his thing he says to all his girlfriends on the phone, which is, oh, that's very sweet of you. Have you ever noticed that? I have. Kramer enters and Jerry hangs up the phone. And then Jerry tells Kramer about his very profound conversation with George, and Kramer guesses where this is going. You thought to yourself, isn't there more to life? Yes, Jerry says. And Kramer drops the bomb. Well, there isn't. Marriage, family, they're prisons, man-made prisons. You're doing time. She's always there, and you have to ask permission to do everything. Oh, it's awful. And Jerry's really glad they had this talk. Oh, you have no idea. Then we cut to a quick scene of George at the beach. He's sitting on a bench, noticing all of the lovey-dovey couples around him, and he's just taking all of that in, lost in thought. All right, next we're back at Jerry's apartment. Elaine enters with a cup of coffee and just in a terrible mood. She says, 3 hours of sleep again. 3 hours of sleep because of that dog. Jerry tells her to call the police. Well, she did, but they won't do anything. Kramer asks, what dog? There is this dog in the courtyard across from my bedroom window that never, ever stops barking. And she says, I lost my voice just screaming at this thing. That was a bad impression of a lost voice. I could have done it really well earlier this year. Do y'all remember when I lost my voice at the Depeche Mode concert? And then I got sick. Anyway, this isn't about me. She says she can't sleep. She can't work. She just moved. She can't move again. What? What am I going to do? And Kramer has a suggestion. Oh, what, Kramer? I'll do anything. What if there was an unfortunate accident? And Jerry's like, wait a second. You're going to rub out the dog? Kramer says, no, not him. But he happens to know someone who specializes in this sticky type of situation. Uh-huh, Elaine says. What, you're considering this? I love it. She just kind of shrugs and is like, yeah, well, maybe. Kramer says, look, just meet with him and see what he says. You have nothing to lose. And Jerry puts his hands up. I'm not going to get involved in this. My take on this scene. All right, well, I can't talk really about this scene until I talk about Elaine's hair. We're in a new Elaine hair era, and I couldn't be more excited. There's no more wall. She took down the wall of hair. I just think it's awesome. I just have to mention it. I mean, it's major, right? We've been seeing 6 seasons. I mean, there was the occasional hair was down here and there, whatever, different style. But for the most part, we were just treated to that wall of hair, but no more. So JLD really did lose her voice. She shot the scene screaming at the dog the day before the rest of the episode. And overnight, she developed laryngitis. So it had to be written into the script. And you can see why. Like I said, that screaming scene, she's so committed. That is some intense screaming. I love how desperate JLD plays this scene. Like the what? What am I going to do? Just so urgent in tone. And honestly, it reminds me of my mom. I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast, but there's something about Elaine, the general look of JLD. It's very similar to my mother. And especially in this moment, I love you, Mommy. I know you're listening, but my mom is one of the most panicky women you will ever meet. she will panic about everything, anything and everything. So this kind of panic, like urgent tone by Elaine, I know I've seen my mom do something very similar to this, act this way. So I think that too is why I love the way she's acting here, because it reminds me of my mom. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't like when my mom is panicked. All of us try and just calm her down a lot. But yeah, she very much reminds me of my own mother in this scene. Now, while I don't condone any sort of animal abuse, I gotta say, with my own experience, those neighbors' dogs, at certain times, we were pretty close to pulling in Elaine here and trying to rub out those dogs. Or at least, I did say, like, I wouldn't wish it on a dog to get, like, eaten by a hawk. But there were times, that 4 a.m. when I got woken up, I was like, where are the coyotes? Get them out here. I'm not proud of it, but they were that annoying. All right, next, we are in Newman's apartment. Elaine is on the couch with Kramer, and she says she's not sure why she's here. Kramer talked me into coming, but obviously I could never really do anything. We pan to Newman, who's smoking a cigarette, and he says, of course, obviously. And Elaine says, sorry for wasting your time, and she's about to go when he asks what kind of dog it is. Well, she's not sure, she says. She's never really seen it. Then Newman goes on a rant about seeing every type of dog on his mail route and how he hates them and thinks they're vile creatures. Kramer has to yell at him to snap him back to reality. Elaine wonders, though, if she did avail herself of his services, what exactly would you do? He says there's any number of things he could do, but guarantees that vicious beast would never bother her again. So what's it going to be? Elaine has a hit of conscience. She's like, no, I can't hurt a dog. I can't hurt a dog. She gets up to leave, and Kramer stops her and suggests, hey, maybe we just kidnap the dog and take it to the country. That way the dog doesn't get hurt and she can have peace. Newman's a bit disappointed with that because he wants to hurt the dog, but he agrees. Yeah, I suppose. Elaine says, I'll think about it. I doubt it, though. I doubt it. Of course. Take your time. I'll be here. My take on this scene, I think it's a very funny tone to this scene. Wayne Knight as Newman gets most of the comedy here. Elaine is very straightforward, but I like how JLD plays this kind of innocently, very polite, like she's meeting someone new. Like she's never seen Newman in her entire life. Like he's a new man to her. Woo! Oh my gosh, that was good. Anyway, very fun scene. And it's such a treat to have Elaine, Kramer, and Newman in a storyline together. We've had Elaine and Kramer together, but this trio, it's pretty delightful. And I do like that Elaine resists all of this at first. She clearly still has a soul about the dog. She doesn't want to hurt it. So I like that we see that. All right, next we are at the beach again. We see George lost in thought, but he's got a little smile on his face. And we see the smile is because he's thinking about Susan. All these different memories of them together, very happy memories. And at the end of the scene, he gets up from the bench with the determination and runs through a flock of seagulls. So ironic because he ran so far away. Oh, you guys, I'm just full of them today. Okay. So next we are in Elaine's bedroom. Elaine is on her bed trying to work on her laptop, her extremely chunky laptop. And then the dog starts barking. Oh, she's getting more and more frustrated. Finally, she picks up the phone. She can't take it anymore. She calls and says, okay, let's do it. And we see it's Newman on the other end. And he says, excellent, excellent. Very reminiscent of Mr. Burns. All right, my take on this scene, so much fantastic face acting here. You feel that frustration right away. And you can see that morality that she had in that meeting with Newman just wearing away with every bark until the point where she's had it. She's all in to get rid of this dog. And back to her hair. I like it clipped up. It's cute. All right, next we're at a restaurant. Jerry is on a date with Melanie, the shusher, and he notices the way she's eating her peas. He asks her why she eats them one at a time. And she just breezily says, what's the hurry? It's clear that Jerry doesn't like that answer at all. The actress here is Athena Massey. She's also appeared on The Larry Sanders Show, The Nutty Professor, Star Trek Voyager, and just like Renee Fea, has lent her voice to many video games. Another one-line girlfriend part, but I think she's fine. I like the delivery and the dismissiveness of her response, which only makes Jerry look that much more shallow. Not that we needed a reminder of that. All right, next we are at Susan's apartment. An out-of-breath George knocks on her door. She opens it and asks, "George, what is it?" He sheepishly asks her with a squeaky voice, "Will you marry me?" That was a little better. All right, next we're at the Costanza's house. Estelle answers the phone and we hear George scream, "Ma! Guess what?" "Oh my God. No, it's nothing bad." "I'm getting married," he says. Well, Estelle perks up. She can't believe it. She calls Frank, "Come here." "You come here." "Georgie's getting married." "What?" "Georgie's getting married." Frank enters. "He's getting married? To a woman?" "Of course to a woman." Estelle asks what she looks like. "Is she pretty?" George gets mad at her. "What does it matter?" "Well, I was just curious." "Well, let me talk to her." So George hands Susan the phone. "Congratulations." And Susan tells her that she loves George very much. "You do?" "Yes." "Really?" "Yes." "May I ask why?" And Frank tries to grab the phone from Estelle, and she doesn't want to give it up, causing them to have this tug-of-war fight argument. George knows what's happening and just hangs up the phone for Susan. All right, next we are in Jerry's hallway. Jerry approaches his door as Kramer's leaving his apartment with some rope around his shoulder. Jerry asks what he's doing and why does he have rope? Kramer is acting a bit suspiciously, and Jerry figures it out. "The dog! You're getting the dog!" George enters as Kramer's leaving, but he tells Kramer to stay. He's got great news. But Kramer has to go. Ho-ho! Jerry and George enter Jerry's apartment, and George announces he asked Susan to marry him, and they're getting married this Christmas. Jerry is shocked. "You're getting married?" "Yes." He says, "I'm a man, Jerry. I'm a man." And she said, "Yes." George says, "Yeah, well, it took some convincing, but she did. She said yes." And he can't believe his luck that a beautiful woman like her was still available. "You think she's good looking, right?" Jerry says, "You're going to have gorgeous kids." George loves her skin. She's got a rosy glow. "Pinkish hue?" "Oh, she's got the hue." Call back to the setup episode. George then asks Jerry, how things are going with Melanie. "I know you're not getting married, but things are happening." "Well," Jerry says, "we kind of broke up." "You what?" "Well, it was the strangest thing," Jerry says. "She eats her peas one at a time. Not like the corn niblets, which she scooped. I mean, it was very vexing." "Uh-huh. What about the pact?" George says. "We shook hands on a pact?" Jerry's like, "What? I don't know anything about a pact. I just shook your hand because you stuck it out." "Anyway, you should be happy. You're getting married." "Well, no, it's not that," George says. "I just thought..." "You thought I was getting married?" "Oh, no, maybe not married." So Jerry confirms, "Look, you love Susan. You want to spend the rest of your life with her." "Yeah." So George calms down. He says he's going to go. Jerry confirms that they're still on to see Firestorm later. He'll pick him up. Then he thinks, "Hey, wait. Let's celebrate. How about some champagne?" George gets excited. Champagne? But Jerry doesn't have any champagne. And it's very awkward and anticlimactic. I'll see you later then. I have to say, I do understand why George is annoyed here because I do think he probably had his hopes up. He's on this high, took this huge risk and asked Susan to marry him. And Jerry just kind of reverted totally back to what he was complaining about in the diner. But George also doesn't know the conversation he had with Kramer, right? So Jerry and Kramer had that conversation and completely changed his mind. So Jerry is like, "Yeah, I don't care. I'm just going to be the way I'm going to be because I don't want to be in a man-made prison," like Kramer explained. So I actually get why George is annoyed here because, we both... Maybe it wasn't a pact, but we did discuss that we're both going to change. And Jerry not only didn't change, but maybe got worse. All right, next we're in a dark alley. Kramer, Elaine, and Newman pull up in a van. Newman is singing, "How much is that dog in the window?" Elaine's like, "Would you shut up?" Newman asks for the rope, and Elaine's like, what do you need that for? Newman snaps at her. Look, I don't have time to explain every little detail to you. Ugh, Elaine doesn't know about this. She's having second thoughts. She asks Kramer, are they doing a bad thing? Kramer says, look, they're doing this dog a huge favor. He'll be in the country dancing and prancing. It seems to appease Elaine a little bit. Then the dog starts barking. That's him, Elaine says. All right, Newman's going in. My take on this scene, not much to the scene, just needed to move the story along. We are seeing Elaine having doubts about this. She's still she knows she wants to do it, but again, we're seeing a little bit of conscience here. Anyway, she's too far in now. They're there with the van. They've made all the arrangements. Plus, I think when she hears the barking, she's reminded again of how much she needs this to stop. All right, next we're in George's apartment. Jerry's at the door, ready to go to the movie. George is a bit hesitant. He tells him, well, he didn't really tell Susan about their plans, and she doesn't really have anything else to do. Oh, well, she can come, Jerry says. Well, she doesn't really want to see Firestorm. She wants to see the Muted Hot. Oh, Glenn Close, Sally Field. That should be good. And Jerry's like, hey, they're playing at the same Cineplex. We can go together. We hear Susan call, George, you better get ready. I am ready. She peeks out from the hallway. You're wearing that shirt? Yikes. Very awkward for Jerry. He says, I'll just see you there. All right, next we're back in the dog napping van. Elaine and Kramer are waiting for Newman. Elaine asks him what time he has. Oh, he doesn't wear a watch. What do you do? Kramer says he tells time by the sun. How close do you get? Within an hour. Elaine's not impressed. She can guess within an hour and she doesn't even have to look at the sun. What about at night? What do you do? Well, night's harder, but it's only a couple of hours. And Newman gets back in the van and tells him to go, go. You got it? What do you think? So Kramer starts driving and Elaine is asking where the dog is. And Newman unveils a small dog. This is the dog? But it's so small. Yeah, but he's a fighter. Elaine says that can't be the dog. And Newman says he got it from the second courtyard, like she said. And Kramer's like, well, get him to bark. Yeah. I'll know it if it barks. They all start yelling at the dog to bark, bark. And the dog just stays silent. My take on this scene, such a fun Kramer and Elaine conversation at the top of the scene about telling time. It just has that Seinfeldian flavor to it, and it just tracks with each character. Kramer's just so matter-of-fact, and Elaine is just inquisitive, but also clearly annoyed by this as well. Like, she's like, what do you do? Like, she's like, what? Which I think also sums up her relationship with Kramer. She's intrigued and annoyed by him most of the time. Introyed, if you will. So I think it's supposed to be a funny reveal that the dog is so small, but you can tell by the bark that the dog is small. It's a higher pitched bark than like a bigger dog. The bigger dogs have like the lower pitched. That's your bark lesson for the day, everyone. So I don't know, that moment doesn't really work for me, like humor wise, like, oh my gosh, it's a small dog. Like, no, that's what it sounded like. I also cringe when they're yelling at the little dog to bark. I mean, I'm sure measures were put in place to make sure this dog wasn't scared, but still, they're like yelling in this little pupper's face. And I don't know, it makes me cringe every time. All right, next we're in the movie theater. George and Susan are in the lobby, and she's crying from the muted heart. George is clearly not as moved as she is. Yes, it was very, very good. You think he'll ever find her again? She asks. Oh, I sure hope so. Oh, it should be noted that George is also wearing a button down with a sweater vest over it. He wasn't going to wear that shirt. And then Jerry exits the theater with another guy, and they are gushing about how amazing the action was in Firestorm, which apparently starred Harrison Ford. And speaking of experience, any 90s action movie with Harrison Ford was fucking tremendous. So I think that was a perfect choice. I mean, have you guys seen The Fugitive? If you haven't, see it immediately. Anyway, in Firestorm, there was an underwater escape. He was shooting back at a plane as he was falling. Oh, they just loved it. And we just see George watching them with envy. All right, next, we're back in the van. Kramer says, put the radio on, see if there's any news report about the dog. And Newman's getting antsy. He just wants to dump the dog already. Elaine wonders if they're far enough away. We're practically in Monticello, Newman says. Well, Kramer spots a house that looks right, so he gets the dog and exits the van. We see him putting the dog on a porch of a house saying, "This is your new home, buddy." And then the dog gets a little feisty and growls and resists. He bites off a bit of Kramer's shirt. "This shirt is from Rudy's." As Kramer runs away, we see the dog just with the ripped off chunk of his shirt in his mouth. All right, next we're at George's apartment. George answers Jerry's call, and Jerry tells him, "Hey, they're rerunning the Yankee game. Are you watching this?" "They are." But then Susan calls to George, "Are you going to come to bed? I taped Mad About You." What was that? Oh, nothing. And George says he's got to go. "Oh, Mattingly just singled." And George just has to let it out. It was really wrong of Jerry to back out on their deal. And Jerry insists again. He never made a deal. He just shook his hand. "Well, that's a deal where I come from," George says. "We come from the same place." "George, I'm starting it." I gotta go. I think that's a little bit of a Elaine, I gotta go flavor to it, which I love. And then we see kind of a bunch of quick scenes. We see the dog running down a road, Elaine sleeping peacefully in her bed with a slight smile on her face. We cut back to the dog running some more. And then we see George at the edge of his bed being spooned by Susan. He's got absolutely no room. And meanwhile, we see Jerry just spread out in his bed, as happy-pappy as he can be. And Kramer is in his bed, but he's having a stress dream about the dog mauling him. And then we see the dog running across a bridge back into the city. Finally, the dog approaches an apartment door, starts scratching at it, and his owner answers, and she's so happy to see Roxy. "We've been worried sick about you." And she finds the bit of shirt that the dog was carrying and spots the tag. Rudy's? The actress here is Janny Bren, and she's also appeared in ER, Murder by Numbers, and Bean with Rowan Atkinson. Who doesn't love Mr. Bean? I think she's great. Plays the concerned owner very well. All right, next we're in Elaine's bedroom. Elaine pops awake after hearing Roxy's barking. It's returned. No. It's impossible. It's impossible. My take on this, not much to say. I just love the reaction. The physicality is great. The way she pops up is hilarious. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine is telling Jerry she has no idea how that thing, the dog, found its way back. We were practically in Monticello. There's no way. Jerry agrees. It's very strange. Anyway, can you tell me who the big mastermind is? Oh, smug Elaine says, "Can't, Jerry. I was sworn to secrecy." Fine. Jerry returns the smugness and says, "Then I can't tell you the big news." And after some coaxing and begging on Elaine's part, What? Jerry gives in. And he says, "This is beyond news. This is like the Kennedy assassination or Pearl Harbor. It's not even news. It's just total shock. Come on, Jerry, please, please, please." George Costanza, is getting married. And we get the biggest, by far, get out shove. Jerry is launched back into his bedroom. All right, my take on this scene, just an observation. I like how Elaine and Jerry are matching in burgundy here. She's got a burgundy blazer on. He's got a burgundy shirt. It's my favorite color, so of course I would notice that. Such a fun moment between two friends when one has news about another friend they both know. We don't get to see giddy Jerry very often, but when we do, it's wonderful. I like this. And I love the delivery JLD gives with the what? It's like her whole body's moving. And Elaine's excited too. Mutual giddiness. It's rare in this show, but it's so cute. And like I said, most forceful get out shove of the series. And you can actually see Jerry Seinfeld brace himself right before she goes in for the push. It's really funny. All right, next we're in the hallway. There are cops at Kramer's door. He answers and they ask him about a piece of fabric. "Oh, yeah. Oh, what?" the cop asks. Nothing. And he says he's under arrest. Arrest? Jerry and Elaine come out, and once Elaine sees what's going on, she turns right back around and closes Jerry's door. Cop says he has a rental receipt with his signature of a van with damage to the rear seat, compressed springs on the right side, which clues Jerry in Newman. So then the cop goes to Newman's apartment, and Newman answers and says, "What took you so long?" All right, next we are in the cop car. Kramer, Elaine, and Newman are all in the back seat. Kramer wonders what's going to happen to them, and Newman says, don't worry. In 20 minutes, the place will be swarming with mailmen. We'll be out on the street by lunch. Elaine is just horrified by this predicament. I got to make some changes. I'm not a woman. I'm a child. What kind of life is this? And we also have a tag to the episode. George is in bed with Susan, and they're watching Mad About You. Either at the beginning or the end. You just hear the theme song. Susan just couldn't look more content, all snuggled up to George, and George couldn't look more miserable. On a side note, I know every lyric to that theme song. I loved Mad About You. Like I talk about certain episodes, this was one of them, by the way. We had on VHS. We taped them from TV. Part of that block was Mad About You, so we would tape Seinfeld and Mad About You. And so I have a lot of Mad About You episodes up in my brain. But I do love that theme song. It's a great theme song. We don't get theme songs very much anymore. But a little tidbit, it's written by Paul Reiser, one of the stars of Mad About You. And another tidbit, that was sort of like when I was watching that as a teenager, I wanted my life to be like the Buckmans. I wanted to have this cute husband and a great dog and have a ginormous apartment in New York City because that's realistic. But yeah, that was like my ideal. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be like that. I'm going to be like with my husband, New York City. Didn't quite work out that way, but everything worked out for the best. My take on that final scene with the cop car, I love Elaine's ending in this episode. It's that callback dialogue from what Jerry and George were saying in the diner. And it's just great. It's a perfect cap to the episode. And also, she's not wrong. She does need to make some changes. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. In the beginning, it was just a choice, a holdover from my childhood. My mother believed in going big or going high in this case. But as I got older, I realized it was a lot more than just a style. It was a lot more than a wall of hair. Our hair. For many of us, our hair is a source of pride and self-expression, something to be proud of and express ourselves. But for some, hair can hold a lot of emotional baggage and secrets. And for one woman, Elaine Bennis, it can put up a literal wall. Hi, I'm Jacinda Cooper, longtime AM radio and public access host. Please tune in to my new special, The Great Wall of Hair. Tear Down That Wall, the hair story of Elaine Bennis. For most of her life, Elaine just thought her wall of hair hairstyle was a practical way to tame her natural curls off her face. But after a tough year of working a dead-end job, failed relationships, and a painful estrangement from her favorite nail shop, Elaine knew something had to change. Elaine, how do you think your wall of hair was holding you back? Oh, God, Jacinda, how wasn't it holding me back? I mean, I settled for a terrible job. I tried to convert a gay man. I dated a communist with a terrible goatee. And I also took out my repression on other people's hair. On other people's hair? How so, Elaine? Well, I'm not proud of it, Jacinda, but I ripped my friend's toupee off of his head and threw it out the window. I also mocked another friend's hairstyle and humiliated her at her office. Wendy, I'm so sorry about that. And also, my shoulder still hurts. In the summer of 1995, Elaine made a life-changing decision that changed her life. She tore down that wall of hair and never looked back. Elaine, talk to me about your post-wall of hair life. Are you a better person? Oh, Jacinda. No, not really. Look, it turns out letting go of my wall revealed a pretty shallow and selfish person. But I look really good. Okay. The Great Wall of Hair, Tear Down That Wall, the hair story of Elaine Bennis can be seen on my personal Google Drive. Just email me at jacindacooper93402969093 at gmail.drive. That's JACINDACOOPERRR 93402969093 at gmail.drive. And I will add you to the share drive within 5 to 14 business days, depending on the Wi-Fi at my local FedEx Kinko's. Hair, walls, self-discovery. Don't miss this powerful special. And you'll need to check your spam folder. And we're back. All right, there was a deleted scene. It's actually an extension of that van scene where they're practically in Monticello. Well, turns out, originally they were going to get pulled over by a cop, and Elaine gets really antsy, and when the cop asks about the dog, she's like, "What? It's my dog. What, I'm not allowed to have a dog? You can't tell me I can't have a dog. It's my dog." It's so bad, you guys. It's like the worst. It's so unnecessary. They were so right to cut it. And I hate to say it, but JLD's performance is not good. So yeah, if you ever see it, oh, just skip it. It's not even worth it. In the notes about nothing, man, I feel like Heidi Sweetberg gets the shaft with all these people involved in this show. So apparently Heidi Sweetberg used to use the term happy pappy during her original run of Seinfeld when she was talking to Larry David. So in conversations with Larry David, she would say happy pappy. So he wrote that into this script as something worthy of breaking up with someone over. Poor Heidi Sweetberg. Also, this is Larry David's final season on the show. So I thought that was interesting and something to note. You know, this is our last season with him. I know he will come back occasionally to do Steinbrenner's voice, I think, but it'll be good to keep that in mind once we get into season 8 to see, you know, the change that happens once Larry David's not involved. All of those scenes for George's flashback montage with Susan, I was always wondering, I'm like, gosh, I wonder if those were like deleted scenes we never saw from her original run. But no, they were filmed just for this episode. Oh, and Roxy is a silky terrier. I'm so bad with dog breeds. I don't really know what breed is what, except for like the obvious ones. But she is a silky terrier, and that breed is known to bark excessively, especially if left unattended. So perfect casting. All right, now it's time to open Greg's sack lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends us, if he can, no pressure, Greg, thoughts on the episode. Greg's overall thoughts. He says, "This is a unique episode in my opinion because Elaine has a story that doesn't revolve around her dating life or her job, and we haven't had one of those in a long time. Here she's teamed up with Kramer, which happens more and more as we move forward, and also with Newman, who, for some reason here, doesn't seem like he's crushing on her as much as he usually does. This episode is just okay for me." Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's very much true. It's super unique, but I bring this up. Oh, maybe I didn't write it in my notes. Well, it's a good time to bring it up now. I think I meant to. Have you ever had that where you're like, oh, I think I did write this down, but I didn't. Anyway, this is a totally gender neutral story, which I love for Elaine because I think that is one of the most important aspects of why the Elaine Bennis character is so successful. Because again, it's not centric on the fact that she's a woman or kind of quote unquote female issues. This could easily be a Jerry storyline, George, Kramer, any one of them. So I do love that. I love that it's not revolved around anything else except for the fact that she's got this super annoying dog that she needs to get rid of. All right. Next in Greg's sack, I find his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, JLD gets to display some amazing scream acting in her first scene of yelling at the dog, and she's so great at this. The rage seems real, and we've all had moments where we felt like yelling "shut up" at someone or something. While the scene is very short, we see immediately what her storyline is going to be for this episode. It's simple and somewhat short, but still funny. Totally agree, Greg. Totally agree. I think that's such a brilliant way, and God, Larry David is so good at this. It's been a while, so I'm going to bring it up. Sometimes I get worried about inundating all of you with like nerdy writer stuff, but exposition. So exposition is sort of the explanation of what's going on in a scene. And sometimes it can be so heavy-handed in episodes of whatever shows like or movies where it's like, hey, I'm just this girl, and because I grew up here, I'm really sheltered. Like when people like spell out everything about their character versus just showing it or doing it in a more organic way, that's bad exposition, or that's too expositional, I should say. But Larry David has a gift of just presenting something in a way where we have so much information by just a little scene. Like this is the perfect example. Just this scene, which has less than 10 words in it, but we know everything we need to know. And that's brilliant to me. Whenever I'm writing, I try not to be too expositional, and I try to do stuff like this. And it doesn't necessarily only have to be without dialogue. I mean, there can still be dialogue, but a lot of times things can be said in subtext or just in the scene setting, which is everything that this opening scene did for Elaine. I love when that happens, and I always notice that in episodes. And like I said, in the Larry David written episodes of Seinfeld, that is done so well. He doesn't spend a lot of time explaining stuff. It just happens and we're already in. We know what's going on. We're ready to move on. Greg goes on to say, my favorite Elaine scene is where she's discussing her issue with Jerry and Kramer, and when Kramer suggests offing the dog. Her voice here is hoarse, and I don't know if that was a real sickness she just happened to have during the filming because it sounded so genuine. I don't know how she could have acted that strained voice. When Jerry says there's no way she could rub out the dog, she's not completely opposed to the idea. And I love that little face she makes, that kind of, I could live with it without saying a word. Her face acting is always so on point. Totally agree with that. And like I said earlier, she definitely lost her voice. They wrote that in because of filming that super committed scream acting scene the day prior. Next, Greg says, I really also love the scene while waiting on Newman to nab the dog. Kramer and Elaine are discussing in the van how he doesn't have a watch and can still come close to guessing the time, and then she dismisses it like she could guess within the hour without looking at the sky. We see that she really is the most normal of this friend group, and she makes faces that just convey that she's thinking, this guy's an idiot. Yes, it's kind of what I said before too, where it's like, she's curious about this, but she's also so irritated by it. Like, I cannot believe I associate with people this idiotic, which is so wonderful. All right, next in Greg's sack, I find his scene swap idea. He says, while the George-Jerry storyline of changing their lives to become family men dominates this episode, I would have at least liked some Elaine input on it. Kramer basically turns Jerry off to the idea, but Elaine is completely left out of this. As a woman with a more ticking biological clock, her viewpoint on settling down would be so great for this ideal. The only tidbit we get is when Jerry tells Elaine George is getting married, and she gives the great shove to him. But I wanted more of her, and I think she might get more on this topic as her feelings for George being engaged play out. I was just about to say that, Greg. So I agree with you. Elaine is totally separate here from that plot of Jerry and George trying to, make themselves better and all that stuff. But I think they made the right decision to reserve Elaine's reaction. I think it's the next episode where she talks to the rabbi and, has all of her feelings come out. So I kind of like that they shelved it for this episode and they were like, you know what, let's give it the attention it deserves in the next episode, because there are some fantastic scenes between George and Elaine when it comes to his engagement. So I don't disagree with you. I do think if Elaine at least had some snarky remark to Jerry, like, oh, right, like you're ever not going to be shallow or something like that, that could have been cute. But for once, I'm actually okay that she's not, like, I don't really have a scene swap idea for this episode, but I totally see your point there too. I think there could have been some good, like, little moments of commentary with Elaine in that whole storyline. And lastly are Greg's extra thoughts. He says, hands down, the best scene of this episode, I knew you were going to say this, Greg, is when George calls Estelle and Frank to tell them he's getting married. Estelle is so great in this scene, going back and forth between being joyful and screaming. I just absolutely love them. Oh my gosh, totally. That scene, it's a highlight of the episode for me too. Greg goes on to say, one last thing. Jerry should have called the police immediately when that psychopath ate her peas one at a time. And then when asked why, she said, what's the rush? I'm not going to sit and watch someone eat 183 peas one by one for an hour, especially when we know she scoops niblets. I guess some people have really strong opinions like you. You want her to be arrested, apparently, for the way she eats her peas. It would take a long time. You're right. But I do love that moment because she's just like, what's the hurry? And can we also say how hot she is? Like, clearly that's the only reason he's going out with her anyway. So I don't feel bad for Jerry at all. All right. Thank you so much, Greg, for all your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. Honestly, I'm just so happy about her hairstyle. That's my favorite Elaine moment. But I guess it's just her hair moment. So if I were to choose an actual acting moment from the episode, I love her rant in the beginning with the, what am I going to do? I just, again, maybe it's because it reminds me of my mom. I don't know. Is that weird? Probably. But I just love the despair she comes in with in that first scene at Jerry's place. And a close second is the giddiness with Jerry between the please, 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 and the what? Those are really fun moments as well. All right, my final notes. Overall, this is a very George forward episode. It's named after his storyline, obviously, and it is very entertaining. Jason Alexander knocks it out of the park with his performance in this episode. But I do love the Elaine storyline here. It's nothing too complicated. It's a very relatable situation, for me personally, especially. That goes a bit off the rails with the dog napping, but I enjoy her having this plot. Like I said, it's very gender neutral. It's just something that's not related to anything else in her life except for just needing to get rid of this dog so she can live her life. And also I love her playing with Kramer and Newman. What a great trio. All right, shallow comment time, totally shallow, but I know I've talked about her hair a bunch, but just beyond the hair, JLD just looks amazing in this episode. Her skin looks incredible. Her makeup is so much more natural and flattering. She's had a glow up, if you will, and I am here for it. I mean, I remember back in 1995 when the season premiered, because I'm on that couch for the season premiere of Seinfeld. Nothing else is getting in my way. Got my homework done. I'm just like sitting on the couch waiting for it. I just remember being so struck by how gorgeous she looked. I already thought she was so pretty, but this was just a whole new level. And I think that's all I can say about the engagement. And we're starting season 7. It's going to be an amazing season. Get ready. Tell your friends. Spread the word about Hot and Heavy. Also, please follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, it's at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you want to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.